The Fallschirmjägergewehr 42 was a ballistic anomaly. It shattered every technological ceiling of its era. Where did a rifle that defied the laws of physics come from? It was born from the desperate requirements of the elite. Imagine the scales. On one side, the American M1 Garand, a heavy, semi-automatic wooden icon. On the other, the FG-42. It was lighter, weighing only 9.9 pounds. Yet it held the power of a light machine gun. A paratrooper reaches for the side-mounted magazine. He slides the fire selector. A sharp metallic click signals full auto. At a distance of 400 meters, it maintained surgical precision. Most infantry rifles of the time were either heavy clubs or weak submachine guns. The FG-42 was both a sniper rifle and a room clearer. It was a phantom from the future. But perfection has a price. The United States produced the M1 Garand for roughly $85 per unit. It was simple. It was rugged. In contrast, the FG-42 was a logistical nightmare. Every receiver required complex industrial milling from solid blocks of high-grade steel. The expectation was a superweapon to turn the tide of the war. The reality was a Reich too bankrupt to arm its own men. Germany was bleeding resources. Its factories could not sustain the intricate demands of such a refined instrument. While the Allies flooded the fronts with millions of standardized rifles, the FG-42 remained a rare ghost. It was the most advanced weapon of the conflict, yet its own complexity ensured its defeat. The Third Reich lacked the economic capacity for mass production. The secret to controlling this untamable power lay in the geometry of the stock, a design that outpaced the blueprints of the AR-15 by decades. 9.9 pounds. Loaded. The American M1 Garand weighed 11. The German rifle was lighter, shorter, and carried a terrifying secret. It wasn't just semi-automatic, it was a handheld lightning strike. 750 to 900 rounds per minute. A 20-round box magazine fed from the side. A bipod folded out for suppression. The barrel swapped out in seconds, just like the MG-42. But the real revolution was hidden in the wood and steel of the shoulder rest. The engineers moved the stock. They aligned the bore axis, the center of the barrel, directly with the shooter's shoulder. Look at the physics. In a standard rifle, the recoil kicks the barrel upward, searching for the sky. In the FG-42, the energy has nowhere to go but back. Imagine the X-ray of a shot. The firing pin strikes. The primer ignites. 7.92mm Mauser cartridges explode with 4,000 joules of energy. That is double the punch of the later Sturmgewehr 44. The roar is deafening. 900 rounds per minute scream from a short barrel, but the weapon doesn't climb. The recoil travels in a perfectly straight line, punching directly into the shooter's frame. This was the birth of the modern assault rifle. The AR-15, the AK-47, the FNFAL, they all live in this rifle's shadow. In 1942, German designers solved a problem the rest of the world hadn't even admitted existed. During a full auto burst, the muzzle remains locked on the horizon. This engineering revolution did not begin in a quiet laboratory. Its blueprints were paid for with the blood of 4,000 paratroopers on Crete in May 1941. Why did the elite of the Wehrmacht land defenseless? Their primary weapons fell in separate containers. Imagine the drop. A paratrooper exits the Junkers 52. He feels the snap of the chute and the whistle of the wind. Below him, British and Commonwealth forces wait with Enfields leveled. The German soldier hits the ground. He has no rifle. He has no machine gun. He has only a 9mm pistol. The doctrine was a death trap. The Kar 98K and the MG-34 were too heavy to carry during the jump. They dropped in steel boxes scattered across the Cretan landscape. The defenders watched the containers fall. They turned them into kill zones. To get a rifle, a paratrooper had to sprint through a crossfire. Many never made the first 10 yards. The air was filled with the smell of cordite and the dull thud of bodies hitting the soil. Survivors and commanders were furious. They had lost the core of their airborne force because of a logistical oversight. The elite died in the grass, reaching for weapons that were hundreds of meters away. By the end of the operation, the tally of dead paratroopers exceeded 4,000. Survivors of the Cretan slaughter didn't ask for improvements, they demanded a miracle. Luftwaffe commanders presented Rheinmetall engineers with a list of requirements that ignored the laws of physics. The ultimatum was clear. Weight, under 10 pounds. Fire mode, full auto for house clearing. Range, 400 meters for open fields. One weapon had to replace the Kar-98K bolt-action, the MP-40 submachine gun, and the MG-34 light machine gun. In 1941, this was an engineering fantasy. It was like asking for a modern smartphone using the vacuum tubes of the 80s. The list of demands grew more contradictory with every line. First, it had to be light enough for a paratrooper to carry during the jump. Second, it needed a folding bipod for sustained suppressive fire. Third, it had to chamber the full-power 7.92mm Mauser round. The engineers looked at the physics of recoil and the limits of metallurgy. A lightweight rifle firing high-velocity rounds on full auto usually tears itself apart, or it climbs so violently the soldier hits nothing but the sky. Rheinmetall took the contract anyway. The blueprints began to take shape around a revolutionary side-loading magazine and a straight-line recoil path. They ignored the traditional wooden stocks of the past. They used stamped steel and high-pressure springs. The designers at Rheinmetall moved from theory to the assembly line. The revolutionary gas system and straight-line stock finally gave the paratroopers the raw power they had demanded since Crete. But the true evidence of the FG-42's lethality didn't come from the firing range. It came from the Allied casualty reports in Normandy. 1944. Allied commanders expected the German lines to crumble after D-Day. They were wrong. The resistance didn't just hold, it stung. Why did veterans call it a sniper rifle with the soul of a machine gun? The weapon weighed less than 10 pounds. It fired the full-power 7.92mm Mauser round. At 400 meters, it possessed the surgical precision of a bolt-action rifle. Flip the selector switch, it became a buzzsaw. A paratrooper crouches in the gray ruins of Monte Cassino. He breathes. A single shot drops an Allied scout at 300 paces. The American squad rushes the position. The German flicks the lever. A 20-round burst tears through the air. The roar is deafening. The stone walls amplify the mechanical scream. The squad vanishes in the dust. In the Ardennes, the story repeated. American infantry encountered elite units. They expected the slow rhythm of the Kar-98K. They got a wall of lead instead. The impact was psychological as much as physical. U.S. commanders issued quiet, unofficial orders. Identify the FG-42 positions first. Kill the gunners. Silence the rifles before the assault begins. The rifle worked. It dominated the ruins of the abbey. It stalled the advance in the forests. It fulfilled every impossible requirement from the Rheinmetall list. Yet, the total production count stopped at only 7,000 units. Allied commanders recorded disproportionately high losses wherever the rifle appeared. The terror of Allied infantry in the Ardennes had a specific engineering origin. It was a stamped steel receiver born in 1942. The mechanics were brutal, a gas-operated system, a rotating bolt. Engineers tapped propellant gases from the barrel to cycle the action. The bolt locked and unlocked the breech with mechanical precision. It was reliable, it was fast. This internal architecture became a global blueprint for the next 80 years. In 1942, soldiers faced a binary choice. The Kar-98K offered precision but lacked volume. Submachine guns offered volume but lacked range. The FG-42 erased the line. A manual selector switch gave the paratrooper two weapons in one. Semi-automatic for the surgical shot. Full automatic for suppression. The later STG-44 often takes the credit for this versatility. The FG-42 simply did it first. Ergonomics followed the same cold logic. Standard rifles like the M1 Garand had magazines protruding from the bottom. They were anchors in the dirt. The FG-42 moved the feed to the left. A flat metal magazine sat flush against the side of the receiver. It slid millimeters above the ground when firing prone. A paratrooper could stay low, pinned to the earth, and keep the lead flying. But perfection cost time. Even the shift to stamp steel couldn't solve the math of the assembly line. The design remained too complex for the crumbling Reich. Every magazine held exactly 20 rounds, but German engineering in 1942 hit a wall of cold, hard accounting. Brilliant mechanics died in the ledgers of a total war. What is the price of a perfect weapon? One FG-42 cost between 450 and 950 Reichsmarks. A standard KAR-98K cost 50. The new STG-44 cost 70. At the factory gate, one paratrooper rifle equaled 10 assault rifles, or nearly 20 bolt-action carbines. It was an economic suicide note. The factory floors told the real story. A milling machine bites into a solid block of high-grade steel. The cutter moves slowly, cooling fluid spraying as it carves the complex receiver. Hours pass. The same machine on a different line stamps out a dozen STG-44 parts in minutes. The heavy, rhythmic hum of the milling machines consumed the Reich's most precious resource: time. One FG-42 required 120 to 150 man-hours. The STG-44 took 10. The math was a death sentence. To build 7,000 elite rifles, Germany sacrificed 60,000 STG-44s, or 130,000 KAR-98K rifles, or 20 Tiger tanks. 950 Reichsmarks per unit represented 6 months of wages for a German worker. No empire could sustain such a bill while its borders collapsed. 7,000 super rifles were a drop of silver in a sea of iron. The state chose to arm the masses with cheap, functional steel instead. Factories burned 150 hours on a single barrel. While they struggled, the distribution of these 7,000 rifles turned into a cynical political game. The weapon existed for one reason: the jump. It was a specialist tool for the Fallschirmjäger to carry into the sky. But by the time it reached the front, the sky was closed. Why would a paratrooper need a specialized folding stock rifle if he no longer jumps? After the slaughter at Crete, the German High Command buried large-scale airborne operations. Elite units took the delivery instead. The Waffen-SS used political leverage to snatch the rifles. The Brandenburg Division received a batch for sabotage and hit-and-run raids. Even combat divers and naval commandos claimed a few. It was a high-tech solution for soldiers fighting in the mud, where the rifle's complexity became a liability. In the forests of the Balkans, the Brandenburgers found the FG-42 over-engineered and impossible to repair. The Luftwaffe tried to save the project by cutting corners. In 1942, they launched the Model 1. It featured a sharp, raked pistol grip and a stamped steel frame. 2,000 units left the factory. It was a failure. The manufacturing defects piled up, and the cost remained astronomical. By 1943, the Model 2 appeared. Engineers straightened the grip and reinforced the bipod with milled parts. They managed to produce 5,000 units before the end. The design was simpler, but it still defied the logic of mass production. It remained a watchmaker's masterpiece in a world that needed sledgehammers. By the final months of the war, the math turned terminal. The Reich could no longer afford the luxury of perfection. Factories ceased all attempts to simplify the construction. In 1944, an American infantryman with an 11-pound M1 Garand managed 40 aimed shots per minute. At the same moment, a German paratrooper with a 9.9-pound FG-42 unleashed 750. This was not a rifle. It was a forensic anomaly of firepower. 750 rounds per minute is the cyclic rate of a heavy machine gun. The Germans crushed that violence into a frame lighter than a standard bolt-action carbine. Compare the silhouettes. The American BAR weighs 19.4 pounds. It is a steel anchor. The FG-42 weighs 9.9 pounds. The American gunner struggles with a fixed barrel and nearly 20 pounds of dead weight. The German paratrooper carries half that mass. He has a 20-round magazine and a quick-change barrel system. It was a mismatch of engineering generations. The M1 Garand was the backbone of the Allied advance. It was reliable, it was semi-automatic. But against the FG-42, it was a relic. The M1 Garand fired 40 rounds. The FG-42 fired 750. A steel bolt slams home with a metallic thud on the Garand. Then, silence. The FG-42 responds with a continuous mechanical roar that shreds cover at 500 meters. Even the revolutionary STG-44 lacked this raw reach. The STG-44 used the intermediate 7.92 by 33 mm round. It was effective to 300 meters, practical but limited. The FG-42 chambered the full-power 7.92 by 57 mm cartridge. It maintained lethal precision beyond 400 meters. It outperformed everything on the battlefield. It weighed half as much as its direct competitors while doubling their output. The FG-42 provided twice the firepower at nearly 50% of the weight. Superiority in fire rate meant nothing against the brutal logistics of 1943. One elite rifle in a paratrooper's hands could not stop a collapsing front. How does the perfect weapon lose a war? The answer lies in dry fuel tanks and a shattered economy. Tactical genius is a luxury. Germany lacked the basics. By mid-war, 10 million Soviet soldiers were advancing from the east. Quality was a fairy tale. The Reich needed quantity. The Kar 98K was the real backbone. It was crude, it was slow, but factories churned them out by the millions. The FG-42 was a precision instrument in a meat grinder. It cost too much. It took too long. The scale of the disaster was too large for small arms. Look up. Thousands of B-17 and B-24 bombers turned the sky into a ceiling of steel. They didn't target soldiers, they targeted the gears of the machine. Strategic bombing leveled the assembly lines. High-tech blueprints do not produce rifles when the factory is a crater. Steel and coal stayed in the ground. Logistics died on the rails. By the time the FG-42 reached the front, the Reich was already out of breath. Strategic air raids reduced total industrial output by over 20% in a single year. After the Reich surrendered, about 2,000 surviving FG-42 rifles did not go to the melting furnace. They went straight to the Aberdeen Proving Ground. American engineers at Aberdeen began the autopsy. They stripped the weapon to its core. One technician unscrewed the flash hider. Another slid the bolt carrier out of the receiver. They laid the gas piston and the rotating bolt assembly across white drafting paper. The verdict from the testers was unanimous. It was superior to any American weapon in its class. But the data revealed a fatal flaw. 7,000 units produced. That total is smaller than the number of Allied infantry lost in just a few days of the Normandy landings. The British reached the same conclusion. The Soviets studied their trophies in silence. The United States looked at the blueprints and then at their own factories. Adopting the German design meant halting everything. The M1 Garand was already in mass production with millions in the inventory. Retooling for a weapon this complex was a logistical suicide. The price of perfection was simply too high. Today, the blued steel of the survivors glows under museum lights. Most of the original 7,000 were crushed by tanks or buried in the ruins of Berlin. Those that remain are the crown jewels of private collections. At modern auctions, an authentic FG-42 starts at $30,000. Some collectors pay over $100,000 for a single piece. The few rifles left are scattered across the globe. Some sit in climate-controlled vaults. Others are locked behind thick glass. Most are gone forever. Where do the ideas of German engineers live today? Inside every assault rifle of global armies. The mechanism starts with a gas port and a rotating bolt. The bolt turns, locks, and unlocks with surgical precision. This specific cycle became the blueprint for the next 80 years of ballistics. American engineers at Aberdeen Proving Ground didn't melt the captured rifles. They dismantled them. The original blueprints and specimens from Aberdeen landed directly on Eugene Stoner's desk during the development of the AR-15. He wasn't looking for aesthetics. He needed the FG-42's DNA. The lineage is undeniable. The M14 rifle adopted the gas system. The AR-10 and AR-15 refined the rotating bolt. Even the FNFAL, the right arm of the free world, carried the German genetic code in its receiver. How did a failed project achieve global dominance? By solving problems before the rest of the world even identified them. Selective fire became the universal standard. The quick-change barrel moved from the Fallschirmjäger's hands to the modern M249 SAW. One failed weapon provided the engineering foundation for every NATO infantry squad. Allied designers took the trophies, stripped the wood, and integrated the steel into the modern arsenal.